This was a pretty enjoyable season. There have been a lot of goals reached, like Rarity getting her boutique in Catch-A-Lot and Rainbow Dash flying with the Wonderbolts. It's also great to see the Cutie Mark Crusaders finally got their marks, although I don't believe they should have what is essentially the same mark. I'm not referring to the mark as a whole, just the fact that it's more of a name tag than the special talents that we've been expecting.
Oh, well, what do you think about Starlight Glimmer?
Hello interwebs, I'm Eric and welcome to TheLooneyTurtle. Starlight Glimmer was introduced at the beginning of Season 5 with a lot of her backstory being a mystery because they can. I'm seriously having a hard time understanding why the writers saved this for the final episode because there was little to no reason for them to. And then there's the fact that she wasn't even relevant during the rest of the season. When you set up that a villain is going to come back later in the season, I expect to see them doing something during the season. And I mean in the foreground rather than the one or two background appearances that we got. Some sort of mention of how she obtained this spell or an explanation of where she even went after running away. Just something to remind the viewers that hey, she's still kicking. We shouldn't just forget about her because the season itself is going on. This is the same world, not a collection of self-contained episodes.
Well, it kinda is a collection of self-contained episodes.
But it didn't used to be. In Season 1, they had a few mentions of the gala, with a few episodes happening as a direct cause of that event. Discord's now a good guy, and while they don't acknowledge him very often, he exists. I'm not asking that the show have entire episodes dedicated to Starlight Glimmer, or whatever element they decide to bring up in the first episode that will inevitably come back in the finale. I just wish that they utilized it more during the season itself.
Why don't you like Starlight Glimmer?
Well, aside from her lack of involvement in the season itself, her actions don't match her motive.
How? She lost a friend due to his cutie mark and started a town that doesn't have cutie marks. Seems pretty straightforward to me.
Yes, but the way she's portrayed in the season opener paints the picture that she's doing this all for power, talking down to these fools and forcing them to run things her way. If she's trying to prevent this from happening again, then why does she yell at them and run away? I'd expect her to be begging them to stay or explaining why she believes cutie marks tear friends apart. If she genuinely believes in this philosophy, then her biggest dilemma should be the fact that she can't remove her own mark.
Why not?
If she does, then she won't be able to remove cutie marks, thus preventing this town, and by extension its ideology, from thriving. But at the same time, she obviously wants to participate in the town that she's created. This can lead to a confusing dilemma, but given her history, that's what she should be battling in this episode. Personally, I would have preferred to see Starlight have an emotional breakdown at the end of the cutie map, because it would spotlight the struggle of maintaining what you believe to be an ideal society without being able to fully participate in it. There's a lesson that can be learned from this setup, but it would be more of a gray area when compared to the other morals we've seen in this show. And come to think of it, that's why this episode was written the way it was.
Why?
Because MLP never presents uncertain morals. Starlight has to be the villain, otherwise there isn't a straightforward lesson that can be learned by the end of the episode. This helps the writers maintain some semblance of a moral high ground, but they may have unintentionally flip-flopped the roles we've come to expect.
How did they do that?
When the main six face a friendship problem or a sort of disruption in harmony, they always work to maintain or re-establish the status quo. Nightmare Moon, Discord, Queen Chrysalis, King Sombra, and many other villains want to liberate Equestria in some way by spreading chaos, stealing love, or some other way like spreading hatred and fear across the land. They want to disrupt the status quo, and that's why they're recognized as the villains. The same can be said about the lesser villains like Flim and Flam, Trixie, or even Gilda. These characters do things that aren't widely accepted in pony society, leading to them getting run out of town.
So what's different when it comes to the main six putting an end to Starlight?
Well, the main six are doing what would usually place them as the villains.
What? How?
This town is isolated from the rest of Equestria and run with the belief that cutie marks tear friends apart. That is the status quo for this town, and while the main six are the protagonists, they're doing what the villains of this series have been trying to do to Equestria.
But isn't this town different from Equestria?
In some aspects, but they're more alike than you think.
How?
Is there a central diplomatic figure?
Yeah.
A civilization run with its own ideals?
Yeah.
And finally, do the citizens follow and trust the actions of their diplomatic figure even when their actions seem a little cruel?
Yeah, I guess.
Given what we've seen in the past, the main six should be set up to lose, but in the end they win, which is a little weird to say the least.
It's not weird. Starlight was forcing her beliefs onto the ponies.
Yes, she did, and in the end, that's why the main six win. There was a corrupt leader that needed to be taken down. So the episode focuses on the negative aspects of this town rather than Starlight's attempts to keep the inhabitants happy. Although they should still be set up to lose, or at the very least, I don't believe they should have the moral high ground.
Why?
Because the resolution doesn't set a good example.
How doesn't it set a good example?
Would there be a problem if the United States decided on a whim to overthrow the Nigerian government?
Yeah?
Then why does it seem alright for the main six to do what is essentially the same thing on a smaller scale? Sure, the US might have a couple moral objections with how Nigeria runs things, but that doesn't mean that we have a right to overtake their government.
But Starlight left and they all got their cutie marks back.
Even after Starlight left, at least some of the inhabitants should be holding on to this belief.
But Starlight was wrong.
From our perspective, yes, but she built this town from scratch, meaning that at least the first few inhabitants thought it was a better way to live. Starlight being overthrown shouldn't have shattered their way of life as thoroughly as we saw in this episode. In the real world, there are many beliefs that persist after overwhelming objection, like the Earth being flat, the sun orbiting the Earth, or the color of this white and gold dress.
For the record, it's black and blue.
There were, and still are, people who don't believe these things even after being confronted with overwhelming objection. The easiest example is that dress. There's either going to be a debate or a bunch of complaints about that in the comments. But the point is that some of the members of the town want to live without their cutie marks. With Starlight, they could do that. But since the main six stepped in, they don't have the choice to live that way anymore. I don't believe that it's a good moral standing, but in the end, that's just what I think. Feel free to let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and while you're at it, why not suggest what I should cover in the future? I know there's a lot of things that you'd like to see me talk about, so I'll let you suggest away. And with all that said, don't forget to like, favorite, subscribe, or click on one of these videos, and I'll see you next time.